morning, good afternoon, good evening. Zimbabwe is a failed state, and so are many other African countries. And at the root of our problems is the failure to hold free, fair, and credible elections. We have been stuck in Zimbabwe with the same corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical ZANU-PF regime for 44 years and counting. The economy is in a mess. Millions of our people are living in abject poverty, all because we have failed to remove ZANU-PF, even when it is clear that they have failed to run the country's affairs. There's been violence in Mozambique following elections in that country because since the country's independence in 1975, Mozambique has been ruled by the same Frelimo government. And recent elections have failed to resolve that. And there are now disputes and protests regarding the results. And what is making the situation totally unacceptable is that Zimbabwe is involved. Zimbabwe played a part in the recent elections, last month's elections. Zimbabweans voted in those elections for no other reason other than to keep Frelimo in power. Every Zimbabwean should hold their head in shame that this has happened. Benjamin, what is the latest on this issue?
Good day to you and good day to everybody. Well, I can report that the latest in Mozambique, as you can see, it's the borders have reopened and the protests have subsided. I believe it is because of the upcoming SADC talks, extraordinary meeting. But there has been warnings that this is just a calm before yet another storm. So I believe they want to find out what discussions and what is the way forward. If probably doesn't sit well with them, we could expect another escalation in protests and violence. And then the other development that is going the rounds is that the Mozambicans themselves have refused the current chairperson, who is Zimbabwe, under Emerson Mnangagwa. They have refused that he be part of that discussion, because we know that Zimbabwe has been fingered in the disputed elections. We know that Zimbabweans actually got ID cards, to vote in that recently, past Mozambican election. So they find, they're finding it difficult for, the aggressor to be part and parcel of, the mediators. So that there is also, another stumbling block that has just developed when it comes to the Mozambican, negotiation or way forward, past these protests.
Initially, I'd heard that there was going to be a SADC summit starting the 16th of November. I wasn't too sure whether it was going to be held in Zimbabwe. Do you have any information on that one?
Yes, so I can report to say that the Herald has said that it has been confirmed that African leaders will be coming to Harare, Zimbabwe. That is where the summit will take place. So they're going to be discussing about the Mozambican elections, and they're going to be talking about even the future elections of countries that are coming up, their with their elections as well. So it's going to be slated for Harare, and preparations are underway, as the Herald has said.
Well, I must admit, if I was a Mozambican, I'll also be very suspicious, because if the SADC meeting is going to be held in Harare, then it is hard to see how Zimbabwean officials cannot be involved in that meeting or play a major part, in fact, in that meeting. And in this particular case, as chairperson of the SADC regional body, one assumes that Mnangagwa will chair it. And I agree, if SANU-PF has been named as one of the parties that were involved in the vote rigging in Mozambique, how can you have the same person who is being accused also chairing it?
Yes. So what they are suggesting? This is just a rumor. It's not yet been actually confirmed, but they are saying that the president of South Africa, uh, Cyril Ramaphosa, should be the one to chair that meetings, particularly the Mozambican protests. They are the ones that are supposed to try and mediate or find up try to come up with a solution to it, because yeah, I agree with you, it'll be very difficult for Zimbabwe to now mediate when they are you know when they are part and parcel of the problem as far as the Mozambicans are concerned, right? It really doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, the truth of the matter is we have seen the evidence, and there is overwhelming evidence there that Zimbabweans did play a part in these rigged elections in Mozambique. And ZANU-PF is involved. And this is not the first time that Zimbabweans have been involved in Mozambican elections. So the whole idea that the SADC the summit can still go ahead in Zimbabwe under those circumstances, even if they say, well, okay, Mnangagwa won't share it. The fact that it's happening in Zimbabwe means Zimbabwe has to be allowed to play a major role in that meeting. And in this instance, I think Mozambicans have got every right to say, no, we are not willing to to um, to let the person who was involved in messing up the the whole election process have to face up with them in the same room. I think SADC has got to make a decision on that one. And as part of his displeasure at ZANU-PF's involvement, move the meeting somewhere else. This particular case, holding it in Zimbabwe is completely out of the question. And I hope that SADC are going to listen to that and change the venue.
So here is the problem. It's you know SADC is not only going to be talking about the Mozambican election. I think there's about three agendas. The Mozambican election, the Botswana election, and I forgot the other country that is coming up. I think you know
I think Namibia is holding elections.
Namibia is the one that is coming up. So they are going to be talking about three agendas. So moving it as far as they're concerned, since there are the two that they believe they're not involved, it will still continue likewise. But another excuse that is being given by some ZANU-PF top brass is, even if Zimbabweans voted in the past Mozambican elections, they are saying, what was the significance of it, the number of people that actually Zimbabwean that actually went and voted in Mozambique. They are very insignificant, because this Frelimo managed to garner 71%. So that is the excuse to say, even how many of the population were Zimbabweans. And my answer to that would be, nobody knows how many was the number of people that actually voted, in Mozambique. How many Zimbabweans actually voted in Mozambique? The fact still remains, they shouldn't have voted there in the first place. So, I think that is another feeble excuse from some of the top ZANU-PF officials.
Well, it is a feeble excuse. I totally agree with you. In this particular case, until thorough investigations are carried out, uh, no one will know for sure how many Zimbabweans voted. The officials themselves, I think, accept that there were many irregularities in the electoral process. And Zimbabweans voting is just one of them. So the fact of the matter still remains that even the Mozambican officials responsible for the elections, they have not announced the results because they themselves acknowledged there were serious flaws and irregularities in the process. But for Zimbabweans to think, oh, well, we have not established how many Zimbabweans voted, and therefore then Zimbabwe should not be considered to be a major problem. I think they're missing the point completely. Zimbabwe should have never been involved in the electoral process in Mozambique. And that is the bottom line. And in this particular case, if SADC is going to talk about this Mozambican issue, if I was a member of the opposition, I too would be saying, if the meeting is going to be held in Zimbabwe, then I don't want to be involved. And for good reason. This is a regime that has deliberately been pro Frelimo and has been involved in the vote rigging. For me to be going to a meeting with somebody like that as pretending to be impartial is completely out of the question. I know that person is not impartial. So why would I want them to be involved? The number one issue in this SADC meeting has got to be Mozambique. Botswana, as much as Zimbabwe was named as one of the countries that were involved in trying to rig those elections, the result prevailed. The people of Botswana still voted for the government they liked, because it is known that Zimbabwe was trying to support the incumbent and they lost. And in Namibia, one can only hope that Zimbabwe is not involved in any way. But as an urgent matter, the most important issue for SADC is this ongoing violence in Mozambique. The longer they try to drag their feet over the issue, the more complex the problem may become. Because if the protests were to reignite, God knows how many more people will be killed. Already, the latest report says over 50 people were killed in the protests. And God knows how many people were injured and how many millions of dollars of property have been destroyed in those protests. SADC has got to move and move quickly. This is a serious issue that must be resolved quickly. And if it's going to be delayed because they cannot make up their mind on where the SADC summit should happen, or rather, they cannot make up their minds to cancel the planned meeting in Zimbabwe and move it to some other country, it's tragic. There is absolutely no excuse for saying decisively Zimbabwe is out. This will be part and parcel of SADC itself, even if the Mozambican delegates have not raised the issue. SADC leaders themselves should show their displeasure with ZANU-PF and saying, no, the meeting cannot be held in Zimbabwe. Even some of those countries that had nothing to do with the elections should say, well, if the meeting is going to be held in Zimbabwe, we are not coming. Because we've got to show for once that we are displeased with what ZANU-PF has been doing. And I think that is absolutely vital.
I agree with you there, because I was just about to ask, for the benefit of our viewers. I know some would have wanted to know, that if this summit is to happen, this extraordinary summit is to happen, what is Zimbabwe, going to attend, this summit as a defendant, or just as any ordinary member? Because I know for sure Zimbabwe has a case to answer, because, like you said, there is video evidence, of Zimbabweans, taking national identification documents. This was documented, sometime last year, if I'm not mistaken. So going into this, summit, what would you expect SADC to do with the role that Zimbabwe has played?
Well, the role that Zimbabwe has played is totally unacceptable, and that should be uh, made abundantly clear. And one way of SADC leaders making that clear is moving this summit that was planned, I think it's the 16th of November. It must be moved from Zimbabwe to another country in protest at Zimbabwe's involvement in this matter. I think that should not be negotiable. And the fact that SADC is dragging its feet, to me, is a sign that SADC leaders themselves are indecisive.
And lastly, for the sake of our viewers, we would want to know, Zimbabwe has been in the same situation. We know last year we had, disputed elections, and we are seeing it in Mozambique. What is the difference between the two situations, and the outcomes of these here two scenarios of disputed elections?
Well, I think the situation in Zimbabwe last year, as much as those elections were disputed, it must be said that the opposition in Zimbabwe participated in those flawed elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, knowing fully well that by participating, they'll be giving ZANU-PF legitimacy. And for anyone to pretend that the opposition did not know the process was flawed is just nonsensical. Because even after the process, SADC and the AU denounced the process as flawed, C leaders all took up their elected positions in parliament, in the Senate, and in the local authorities. Even after the elections were declared to be flawed, they argued that those were liberated zones. That's nonsense. So I think the flawed elections in Mozambique and in Zimbabwe are different in that regard. And that is why I believe SADC did not deny ZANU-PF any legitimacy. But in Mozambique, it's totally different. The opposition in Mozambique have no cause to believe that the elections will be rigged. And when they realize the elections were rigged, they've made it very clear that they are not willing to accept the results. And I think that is a significant difference.
I agree with you. That is the most, significant difference. If we look back at events, this is exactly what happened after our disputed elections. There was the extraordinary summit. But unfortunately for Zimbabwe, instead of waiting to, for the wheels to turn, we decided to put the cart before the horses, and C decided to take up their positions, and they were sworn in, thereby legitimizing the whole process, and then making SADC look foolish to say, we are the ones that are disputing, but these guys, they seem to have agreed on the best way forward. They have since given each other, positions within, their current their current government. So I think that is where the situation is different. But just to conclude, I would want, or I would like to ask, what is the best way forward for Mozambique? We know, people are dying. Reportedly, over 50 people have been killed so far. And violence and protests, they never end well. So, what is the best way forward to end this, this protest and the loss of life?
Well, personally, I think what SADC should do is propose a government of national unity in which it doesn't have to be Frelimo leaders, it doesn't have to be opposition leaders, but interested key key players in the Mozambican body politics to be involved in a government of national unity, and probably learning from experience of our own GNU, get not only politicians, but other people as well involved, intellectuals, technocrats, and so forth, in a government of national unity whose number one task will be to implement the democratic reforms to make sure that the country's institutions are now independent and are able to deliver the fundamental freedoms and rights of all Mozambican people, including the right to a free, fair, and credible election. And then for that country to hold the elections as soon as possible. That is not an impossible task. And with the political will, I believe they can implement the democratic reforms that will stop the democratic institutions being corrupted by one side for and deliver free, fair, and credible elections. Because I think it's not a question of the opposition rejecting the result. If the process is seen to be free, fair, and credible, people will accept the results. There's no question about that. The main problem we have had in our part of the world, why people have been, why there've been so many protests, is that the process itself is not seen as free, fair, and credible. And that's allowing people to have no faith and no confidence in the process nor the result.
Thank you for that. In conclusion, I would, like to say, I believe SADC knows that, all eyes are on them at the present moment, and people are waiting for a decisive and a fair, resolution to this, Mozambican election. The protests and violence, they are claiming lives and the destruction of property, not only to the Mozambican people, but, as you could see, borders were closed, there was no trade, economies are at risk. Mozambique is a big port for many, many countries, particularly Zimbabwe. We use that as our port to ferry, goods and to receive goods. So I'm hoping that, they make it a fair and decisive approach to finding a lasting, resolution to this whole, fiasco. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benjamin, and to those listeners who were able to join us today. Thank you very much. We'll hope you'll be able to join us again tomorrow, 6 o'clock UK time, 8 o'clock Zimbabwean time. And my apologies to some of you who found that at 6 o'clock we were not able to broadcast. We're having some issues. But thank you again for your patience, and have a good day.